again, this is Imaduddin Aisha, and I want to apologize for my get-up. These are my reading glasses. Actually, an old pair of regular specs, but they're better for reading. And I was reading a translation, interesting enough, of Minority Report by an Egyptian friend of mine. And that got me thinking about world building, which is what I want to talk about today. What the hell's happened to world building in cinema nowadays? You seem to have there's this whole damn intellectual craze in the Western world of postmodernism, and it's wreaking havoc with world building, messing up life in general, but it's having a particularly noticeable effect on world building. You don't have proper world building anymore. World building in cinema used to get great directors like George Lucas, Ridley Scott, Stephen Norrington, a guy who gets overlooked a lot, George Miller, of course, who are master world builders. And then you get produce beautiful and plausible worlds that you can believe, that they're functional, that can actually work. And then you get second-tier people who are not world builders as such. They don't actually invent worlds, write them up, but nonetheless they know how to manage the process of world building. They know how to get the writers, to get the futurists, to get the artists to put together a convincing world, and they know how to present you that world very well. Of course, that includes definitely Steven Spielberg in Minority Report. He got together a bunch of futurists, and they came up with all these cool gadgets, including the vomit sticks and the power packs that make you fly, and he produced a world, or presented a world to you that was completely convincing. You could believe that there was a police department dealing with pre-crime, things happening before a crime, and seeing the future, to the point that people have an entire subculture and language geared towards this reality, with precogs and the temple, the place where they keep the precogs, and people worshipping them and developing a cult around them. It completely convinced you that it was real. There's some plot errors and some world building errors here and there, but nonetheless it works. People like Gareth Edwards, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. If you look at the city of Jeddah in it, you can tell it's modeled on, quotes, Jerusalem, down to the Dome of the Rock Mosque, this dome that's yellow and reflecting in the sunlight, and the city walls and the city marketplace, and it's a thoroughly Arabian feeling, or Arabic feeling, North African feeling city. Created a very real city, the marketplace, and all these things. It's also like watching Gladiator, the scene where they're in the marketplace and the red ink is falling down on, red dye is falling down on the gladiators, and red is the color of the gods. The gods are blessing you. These kind of things. It's a real Ridley Scott movie, of course, imitating a Ridley Scott movie. And imitating, of course, George Lucas, master world builder he is. Paul Verhoeven, another guy who really knows how to present you a world with all its details in a compact way that has exposition, but a way that isn't cheesy and forced. RoboCop and Starship Troopers. And even to an extent Total Recall, to be fair. We have the news broadcast and the dream sequences and all these things, and the commercials, and the technology for x-raying people when they go into the subway, all these things, the underground metro lines, and these. And would you like to know more? And this heart, that heart, and we care. And these endless commercials, and they actually, you may not know this, but the clips used in the commercials were actual real news broadcasts about the SDI, Star Wars Strategic Defense Initiative of Ronald Reagan, and various news broadcast clips, actual real. And the two people that are talking, one of them, the Asian-looking guy, is an actual anchorman from San Francisco. He's famous in the 80s. I was around in the 80s, so I recognize his face. This is top-notch world building. Even if the director isn't actually inventing the world, but he's getting people who can invent it for him, and he knows how to make it compact and consistent and give you an adrenaline jolt and an intellectual jolt while you're watching it. Then you get directors who think that they're world builders but aren't. I think the most infamous probably is Zack Snyder. I haven't watched Rebel Moon, but he has all these things from historical references and artistic mythology that are put next to each other and just don't work. They don't fit together. They stand out like sore thumbs. And J.J. Abrams, he does imitation Steven Spielberg movies right down to the lens flares. And I like lens flares, but when he does it, I don't. What was it called? Super 8. Now that actually is a good movie. There's a lot of artistry and sensitivity in it, and really good acting and sincerity from the two main actors, the boy and the girl. But when I was watching it, I just didn't like it. It screamed to me facsimile, imitation 70s, imitation Steven Spielberg, and you could tell. And the hairstyles and clothes from the 70s were just exaggerated. They weren't actually that pronounced in the 70s and the early 80s. And he got the color grading wrong and the camera work wrong. Everything looks like it's dark and covered in soot, which is a very modern filmmaking style. That's not the kind of style that you had back then in the 70s and the early 80s. Again, Steven Spielberg, lots of loud colors in his movies, and Jaws and E.T. and all these things. It's imitation Spielberg. And also you notice the kids, the band of kids, which is again a kind of a trope or motif that you get in Steven Spielberg and Stephen King. I confuse the two again. The band of, or the Goonies, and wonderful movies, classic movies. But again, he's doing it in a way that doesn't work. The kids are very unlikable. Only one of them, the boy, the hero, so to speak, is the person you like. And that's against the whole point. It's a team effort, and they're standing up for their friend. It's what you see in E.T. Even the kids that picked on him, when time came to be responsible, they stuck by him. And also he didn't like the alien, he was evil, and he didn't like the special forces people controlling the alien. They were evil, perfectly willing to kill an innocent person. That didn't happen at all in Steven Spielberg in Close Encounters of the Third Kind or E.T. or anything. They were overprotective people who took the law into their own hand, but they didn't abuse the law, and they weren't evil, they weren't sadistic or anything like that. So he's not getting the point, J.J. Abrams. And I watched a documentary once about Industrial Light and Magic with Tom Cruise talking. Great documentary. You can find it on YouTube. And J.J. Abrams popped up in it, and he was very distraught about George Lucas. So the guy had done everything. He'd created all the different environments, ecosystems, a desert planet, an ice planet, a swamp planet, Hoth, Dagobah, Tatooine. They'd left nothing for these young pipsqueaks to compete to do for themselves. That's one of the reasons postmodernism is becoming so popular. It justifies intellectual lack of creativity. It justifies artistic ineptness, just imitating because that's all language is and all art is and all philosophy. It's just imitation of something before, which is impossible. Somebody has to be original. If you're imitating somebody before you and he imitates somebody before, go back forever to the Big Bang, and it couldn't happen because it would take forever to catch up with you. That's an argument, incidentally, used by medieval Muslim astronomers and philosophers for the creation of the universe. If the universe had always existed, it would take forever for something in the past to get to you in the present. It just wouldn't happen. That's postmodernism for you. It's the rationalization of lack of creativity, of creative bankruptcy. That's the word. And wouldn't you know it, I think one of the directors who fits in that, and you knew it was coming, is Mr. Denis Villeneuve. Now that I look back at it, Blade Runner 2049, and my innate sense of that there was something wrong in it, as beautiful as the imagery is, beautiful, I don't deny that. It's great cinematography and big scale and these kind of things. Colors are nice, but again, he's producing a world that just is not functional, that can't exist the way that it supposedly does exist. In the original movie, you have spinners, these flying cars, and so you constantly have lights streaming into houses and apartments from the outside world. And it's meant to be a thematic thing, no privacy, hinting at a police state, which it is. And you look at the door on Deckard's apartment, like at 2,343 or something. There's so many people in the apartment block. It's a giant apartment block. People have become ants. People have become dwarfed by this massive thing of society and the state and the corporations and all these things. And you have the Orwellian eye at the beginning. Here, the world of Blade Runner 2049 is worse even than that. You have ecosystems dying to the point that plants are becoming a rarity and people don't know what wood looks like and trees look like. I assume there's more overpopulation, and you have drones as well as spinners flying through. And you don't seem to see any light streaming in through from the outside in the windows. Not that I can remember at any rate, and you don't hear any noise from the outside as well. The only time you see light streaming in is beautiful, gorgeous, warm sunlight in an ecosystem that's collapsing where you have snow almost every day. Oh, just a second, somebody at the door. Sorry about that. Donations. And I turned my phone off so that they probably couldn't warn me they were coming. My mistake. I've really got to go and live on an island by myself to do these recordings properly. Egypt's just too noisy. Well, anyway, what was I saying? Blade Runner 2049. You can't tell whether this world is overpopulated or underpopulated because you have these large expanses of wilderness, and you don't get the same level of overcrowding in the city that you had in the original movie. In the place where he's in the sushi restaurant or noodle restaurant, you have lots of leg room and you have bright colors, and there's no dirt and grime on the clothes. Everything looks like it's freshly pressed and ironed. The prostitutes all look well fed, and they look like they're enjoying themselves. They like the lifestyle, and they enjoy being slaves, genetically engineered for this kind of thing. And they're wearing clean clothes, and there's no air of desperation. They don't have rings under their eyes. You don't get the sense of drug addiction or anything like that, or being abused by customers. The whole point of prostitutes is to show how bad the society is, the underclass of people exploited. And they look like fashion models on a catwalk, literally. And that's actually the whole problem. I was watching a documentary about the making of Blade Runner 2049, and you realize that the team responsible for it, not just the director, they don't know jack shit about world building. Denis Villeneuve is saying we got this color to represent knowledge and this color to represent... Okay, fine. And we have a grey atmosphere, grey buildings and things like that, but we use little splashes of color to break the monotony in the form of the loud flared clothes. But he's thinking like a fashion designer. Fashion designers do that. They have a kind of block color, and then to distract you from that, not let you get overwhelmed, they have a splash of color. But I actually saw that once in a comedy series on television in Egypt, adapted from Ugly Betty, a fashion company. But this is a real world where people actually live in that go to work. Clothes get dirty, especially with rainfall and dust and snow. And it's supposed to be dystopian. People aren't supposed to look good. They're supposed to be dressed nicely, except for the ultra-rich. And even there's utopia, dystopia, but this isn't. This is just dystopia. And it's a worse place than the old world of the original Blade Runner, 2019, because here you have drones surveilling you. You can't have an electronic girlfriend, a CGI, without the microprocessor tracking your motions. It's worse, and you don't have proper food. You have synthetic mush, these worms, genetically engineered worms, genetically modified worms. And for some reason you have the noodle restaurant where he's actually having proper food. They forgot that their people are eating grubs. The only guy who takes taste in food is the poor replicant who gets killed in the beginning using garlic with those muck things. Sorry. Got the fan on, it's dust. Again, it's really hot. So, I mean, you can see that they're not making a world that actually works, that looks good and is functional, that communicates themes and can exist by itself, sustainable by itself. And I said before that you have global cooling, but you have sea levels rising, which doesn't make any sense, and you have solar power with snow and clouds, and you have clean renewable energy with ecosystems dying, the wider the ecosystems die. And you have all sorts of other stupid things. I can understand the thematics of it, and the thematics are actually admirable, to be fair, but it doesn't work. You have Wallace, again this mediocre postmodernist bad guy, who has to get a woman to do his dirty work for him, because he's isn't man enough, and that's going to make me really impressed by him. threatened physically by him, and that kind of thing. And he's talking to Deckard and says, we're going to take you off-world to torture you to get information out of you. And he's talking about black CIA sites for torturing terror suspects. That's a thematic reference. But again, it doesn't make any sense, because this is Earth, a world run by corporations where his goons can go into a police station and kill people in front of the cameras and get out scot-free. Which is what happens. And steal things and kill the police chief in her office. Why the hell would they have to go off-world to torture somebody? And why would they have to torture somebody in general? Don't they have brain scanners and these kind of things in the future? I mean, he's a blind man who can see, has implants and things like that. Do you think they'd be able to hack into somebody's brain in this kind of future world? And you have a world where they give people false memories and these kind of things. So there's alternative means to old-fashioned torture. And it's full of cliches. When Wallace kills the replicant woman, his goon, his female henchwoman, flinches. She's a henchwoman. She's the one who enjoys feeling superior when she kills a human being. The police chief and the guy in the morgue or whatever it is, where they keep the bodies and the evidence and that kind of thing. And she enjoys beating up Officer K, feeling superior and treating him like a disobedient dog and that kind of thing. She's going to flinch when she sees, oh, yuck, blood, or somebody killing an innocent person. I would never do that. And she has her nails polished and decorated in a postmodern fashion, I think, with an Elvis look or something like that, a hologram, while blowing up people using drones, blowing up poor people. You have two big sequences in the movie that are impressive visually and thematically, but again, they don't make any sense in terms of world building. You have every scene is inconsistent with the scene before it, inconsistent with the scene. Every plot point or world building point doesn't make sense, doesn't fit in. It's not sustainable in the whole world of the story. Two scenes: the scene where Kay goes to the place, this place out in the wilderness, where they have all these children making circuit boards. And I understand the motifs, the imagery, the symbolism, which is very good, and it's very big and impressive. I don't deny that. It's well shot. You have kids making circuit boards for first world countries, so to speak, but the kids are white, and the guy running the place is black. And also the kids are clean-shaven, their heads, which makes them look like Buddhist acolytes, while as the guy in charge has these kind of velvety red, purpley red towel or clothing or whatever around his head, which makes him look like a Buddhist monk. Multinational corporations or something have become the new gods. That's really good. That's interesting, but it doesn't make sense. You have a world where you have slave labor for free, replicants, grown, full adult with false memories and genetic programming to make them obedient. How the hell could these kids, who I assume are human, compete with them? Economically, it just wouldn't make any sense. Can a guy who hires unionized labor, pays them decent wages, compete with somebody who has ununionized labor or slave labor or immigrant labor that's cheap? Can compete in terms of prices, not quality? Of course not. Another big sequence which is impressive, and I understand the themes of it, and the imagery is beautiful, but doesn't quite make sense. The Deckard hiding in what I assume is Las Vegas after it's been hit by what I assume is a dirty bomb, and he's raising bees. He's a beekeeper, and that's a classic motif for the cop, the caretaker, who's retired. And he's a caretaker. He takes care of the bees, and the bees take care of him. And you find that in John le Carré, for instance. You have in the very first novel, Call for the Dead. What was the name of the guy? You have the special branch guy who's going to retire, and he's going to be beekeeping, and he pops up later on again as a beekeeper. That's a common motif. It's like a prison warden with a cage with birds in it, or taking care of flowers, like Creepy Creedy and V for Vendetta. If you watch Wedlock, prison-type drama, science fiction, you also have the, I think Steve Tobolowsky, great actor, playing a prison warden. He also has these flowers and plants that he takes care of. He likes these potted plants that he can control, these kind of things. And the beekeeper is a kind of benign version of the retired cop. And it's also showing that life is thriving in this area despite the so-called dirty bomb. So people are terrifying themselves of the terror threat, which is exaggerated, and that allows the authorities to control them, whether it's the cops or corporations or the government or whatever. That's a cool, thematically it's a cool, but it just doesn't fit in with the rest of the story. There's no mention of terrorism anywhere, or wars abroad, or resource wars, or anything like that. And the Earth is depopulating itself to go to the colonies, the off-world colonies. And that's why you don't have the same kind of population pressure that you had in the first movie, but at the same time you have more pollution, apparently. And global cooling at the same time, despite that more pollution. So again, it's a hodgepodge of images. The images by themselves look good, like in a gallery looking at a painting and another, but those paintings are not part of a stream that is a film, of moving pictures, which has a story and a world in it, and themes that are sustained by that world, which nonetheless is practicable and real. If this was a surrealist movie, a comedy, satire movie like Brazil or something like that, you could get away with that. But it isn't. And Brazil, it says, is a very consistent world. Terry Gilliam, he's another master world builder, I should say. Yeah, I forgot to mention it. And of course, George Miller, we talked about it before. So this whole intellectual diatribe was an excuse by me once again to pick on Denis Villeneuve, to indirectly pick on Dune Part 1. But I'll keep that for later. And I will praise Dune Part 2. And even some of the good aspects on Dune Part 1, to be objective. Not that there's any reason to be. Oh, last thing I didn't like about Blade Runner 2049 was the long, boring scroll at the beginning telling you what the people who hunt down replicants are still called Blade Runners, as if we can't tell that from the title of the movie, which is a sequel. And I was wondering why he would use such a boring presentation of these facts which don't make any sense. People making Nexus 8s that live as long as human beings are rebellious, just like the Nexus 6s, no failsafe to kill them. Stupid things like that, and getting rid of the empathy test, which is like a lie detector test, 1950s America, McCarthyism. A friend of mine actually figured that out, a philosophy professor from Alexandria. I didn't notice that myself, but I'm a fan of the movie. And the whole thematic thing about what makes you human, empathy, that's all absent in the new movie. You have all these empty themes that just don't go anywhere. I mean, even in that scene where you see Mackenzie Davis for the first time, Mariette, one of the women is very butch and big and broad-shouldered, and I thought, they're talking about androgeneity. Well, I'd seen the screenshot, but when I watched the movie, they just don't explore it. It's just there for the sake of being there because it's a popular theme nowadays. Give people what they want, feed them candy, show, I don't say shit in their mouths, but it's just empty. It's just scaffolding, it's imagery. It's postmodernism. Just imitate what's going on, what's fashionable. Like the movie The Player, look through a newspaper, the headlines, put a scene in that fits that headline because it's what people talking. But it doesn't actually tell you anything about the story or the characters or the themes or what's going on in the world. It's a mess. And it seems directors have bred themselves into thinking like the studios. The studios just want to put things in because they're headline grabbing. The Player, great movie. And the director said, it's okay, postmodernism, all we ever do is imitate things done before us, done better by people before us. Well, if they were better, then they were it's because they were original, so they weren't imitating people before them. It's self-contradictory philosophy. And wouldn't you know, that's one of the things that afflicts Dune Part 1. But again, I'll leave that till later. Is there anything else I was going to say about Blade Runner 2049? Oh yeah, the scroll. Compared to the really cool scroll in the first movie, he didn't imitate that for some reason as a postmodernist. I figured out where he was getting it from. The scroll, the long, boring scroll that you have in Sicario, which is actually a very good movie, and wouldn't you know it, a movie set in the desert that actually brings out the beauty of the desert. But you can't do that when you have an entire desert planet to play with, to your heart's content. But that's enough for now. Emad, over and out. SF, author and researcher in Egypt, and a bit of a translator as well. Goodbye.